You walk 3 times a week. You take your blood pressure medication without fail. Your last checkup came back fine. Your doctor even said you were doing well for your age. So you have every reason to feel like you're on top of this. But here is what nobody in that exam room told you.
There is one specific thing you do every single morning. Not what you eat, not whether you smoke, not how much you exercise. Something that happens in the first few minutes after your eyes open. And for adults over 60, skipping it silently damages the inner lining of your arteries. Not dramatically, not painfully, quietly, every single morning.
The American Heart Association has found that adults over 60 who miss this one morning habit show higher markers of artery damage by mid-morning every day they skip it. That is not a small finding. That is a pattern happening inside your chest right now, and most doctors never bring it up. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what that habit is, why it matters for your blood vessels, and the simple 2-minute routine that protects your heart before your feet even touch the floor. My name is Dr. Ethan Kent. I have spent over 22 years working in heart medicine, in clinics, in recovery wards, and sitting with patients who survived scares they never saw coming, and with families who wish they had known sooner. The pattern I keep seeing is not unusual. It does not involve people who ignored their health. It involves people who did most things right and were simply never told about this one gap in their morning. A gap that costs nothing to fix and takes less than 2 minutes. Today, I will show you why mornings after 60 are the most dangerous hours for your heart, what most people are getting wrong without knowing it, and a clear 4-step routine backed by published research that you can start tomorrow. This is not general health advice. This is specific, practical, and ready to use. Stay with me. Most people think of sleep as the safe part of the day for their heart. In many ways it is. But the full picture is more complicated. And after 60, it changes in ways that most people are never told about. While you sleep, your body runs in a kind of low power mode. Your heart rate slows down. Your blood pressure drops between 10 and 20% below its normal daytime level. Your arteries relax. And your blood, because you have not had a single sip of water in 7 or 8 hours, and because every breath you exhale carries moisture out of your body, becomes thicker and slower moving than it was when you closed your eyes the night before. Then something shifts. Your brain begins waking up. And here's the part that surprises most people. This process starts long before your alarm goes off. Roughly 45 to 60 minutes before you are fully awake, your adrenal glands begin releasing 2 powerful stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. This is called the cortisol awakening response. It is not a problem. It is your body's built-in ignition system, designed to get you ready for the day. But here is where age changes everything. In a younger person, the arteries are soft and flexible. When that morning wave of pressure arrives, the vessel walls stretch to absorb it, the same way a new rubber hose handles a sudden rush of water without any strain. After 60, that flexibility is reduced in the vast majority of people, including people who feel completely fine and have no known heart problems. The artery walls have gradually become stiffer over the years. And when that same morning pressure surge hits stiffer walls, the stress on those vessels is significantly greater. Research published in the journal Hypertension found that adults over 60 experience a morning blood pressure spike that is on average 34% larger than the same surge in adults under 45. That is not a minor difference. That is a completely different level of strain on the heart and blood vessels, and it happens every single morning, whether you feel it or not. This is why the window between 5:30 in the morning and 10 in the morning carries the highest risk of heart attack, stroke, and sudden cardiac events for people over 60. Not in the afternoon, not late at night, in the early morning hours, while most people are just starting their day and thinking about breakfast and coffee. This is not bad luck. It is not random. It is the direct result of biology, a predictable sequence of events that happens inside your body every morning. And once you understand it, you can do something about it. That is exactly what the rest of this video is going to show you. So what is the habit? What is the one thing that most adults over 60 do every morning that turns a manageable biological surge into something far more dangerous? It is this: getting up immediately after waking.
That is it. The alarm goes off, and within seconds, you are sitting up, swinging your legs over the side of the bed, and standing. Some people are on their feet in under 3 seconds. It feels completely normal, because it is completely normal. You have done it thousands of times. Nobody ever told you there was another way. And on the surface, there is nothing about it that feels even slightly risky. But here is what is happening inside your body in those 3 seconds, and why, after 60, it matters enormously. When you are lying flat, your blood is distributed fairly evenly throughout your body. The moment you stand up, gravity pulls a large volume of blood downward into your legs, into your abdomen, away from your heart and brain. Your body has to respond to that shift immediately. In a younger person, it does. The blood vessels in the legs contract quickly, pushing blood back up. The heart rate adjusts, blood pressure stabilizes within a few seconds, and life goes on. After 60, that reflex is slower. The vessels do not respond as quickly as they once did. Blood pressure can drop by 15, 20, sometimes 30 points within seconds of standing. You may know this feeling, that brief, gray, dizzy, slightly foggy sensation right after you get up. Many people over 60 experience it and assume it is just part of getting older. It is not something to brush off. It is your cardiovascular system struggling to keep up with a transition that happened too fast. Your blood is already at its thickest of the entire day. Your arteries are already under the pressure of the morning cortisol surge. Your vessel walls are already stiffer than they were at 35. And now, on top of all of that, you have just forced your heart to deal with a sudden drop in blood pressure caused by standing too fast. Your heart responds by working harder, pumping faster, pushing with more force to try to restore circulation to your brain and vital organs. That combination is what cardiologists call a triple cardiovascular load. Thick blood, narrowed, stiffened vessels, a pressure system swinging sharply in both directions within seconds of waking. For a completely healthy heart with young, flexible arteries, this level of stress is manageable. The body compensates and moves on. But for an adult over 60, especially one carrying any degree of undetected plaque inside the coronary arteries, which describes a very large number of people who feel perfectly well, this sudden compounded stress is the kind that cracks things. Literally. A plaque that has been sitting quietly on an artery wall for years can rupture under exactly this type of mechanical strain. And when plaque ruptures, a clot forms. And a clot in the wrong artery is a heart attack. All of that from 3 seconds of standing up too fast. Standing up too fast is the core mistake. But most people do not stop there. The next few minutes of a typical morning layer additional stress onto a cardiovascular system that is already operating under strain. None of these habits are reckless. Each one is completely logical. But together, they build something that is far more dangerous than any one of them alone. And then, what most people do next is head straight for the coffee. This is understandable. Coffee is part of the morning routine for the majority of adults over 60. It is familiar, it is comforting, and it genuinely helps with alertness. The problem is not the coffee itself. The problem is the timing. Caffeine is a vasoconstrictor. That means it causes your blood vessels to tighten. In the context of an already pressure-loaded morning cardiovascular system, the cortisol is already doing that work,
All the early coffee ads, from a physiological standpoint, is more hormonal pressure on a system that does not need it. And then what most people do next is walk into a cold bathroom.
Again, this is not a careless choice. It is simply what a morning looks like. A cooler room, cold tiles underfoot, cold water on the face. But cold exposure causes immediate vasoconstriction. The blood vessels tighten rapidly in response to the temperature drop as the body works to preserve its core heat. In a younger cardiovascular system, this is a minor event that resolves quickly.
In an over 60 system that is already dealing with stiff arteries, thick blood, a cortisol surge, and the after effects of standing up too fast, a sudden cold-triggered constriction can push blood pressure into genuinely dangerous territory within seconds. This is one of the documented reasons why morning cardiac events increase significantly during colder months, particularly in older adults. And then, what most people do next is check their phone. Before the water has been drunk, before the body has had a single minute to settle, the phone is in hand. Notifications, messages, news, whatever arrived overnight. The brain, which is still transitioning out of sleep and has not yet fully stabilized, begins processing all of that incoming information as potential threat. A second wave of cortisol is triggered. Blood pressure climbs again. The stress response, which was already running at its morning peak, gets a fresh push.
Each of these three habits is ordinary. Each one feels like just part of the morning. But stacked together, in a body over 60 that is already navigating its most vulnerable cardiovascular window, they create the exact internal conditions in which silent arterial damage occurs and in which cardiac events begin. I want to tell you about a patient I will call Raymond. Raymond was 71 years old, a retired civil engineer. The kind of man who approached his health the same way he approached everything else in his life, carefully, consistently, and with attention to detail. He took his blood pressure medication every morning without missing a single day. He walked for 35 minutes after breakfast, 5 days a week, rain or shine. He attended every scheduled checkup and had done so for over a decade. His cholesterol was being managed with a statin. His GP had reviewed his heart function the previous year and found nothing that caused concern. By any reasonable measure, Raymond was doing the right things. One Wednesday morning in March, he woke up at his usual time, silenced his alarm, and got out of bed the same way he had for years. He walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on his face, went to the kitchen and switched on the kettle. He checked his phone while he waited for it to boil, a few messages, the morning news. He poured his coffee and sat down at the table. That is as far as he got. His wife found him slumped in the chair. He was alive, but unresponsive. By the time the ambulance arrived, Raymond had suffered a significant cardiac event. He spent 11 days in hospital. The recovery was long and difficult, and it changed the shape of his life in ways he had not anticipated and had done nothing to deserve.
When I reviewed Raymond's case in detail, the clinical picture was consistent with a man who had been genuinely responsible about his health. The medications were right, the exercise was real, the monitoring had been thorough. There was no obvious failure anywhere in his medical care.
But when I sat with Raymond during his recovery and asked him step by step to walk me through his morning, from the moment the alarm sounded to the moment he sat down with his coffee, the pattern was exactly what we have been discussing. Up in under 3 seconds, straight to a cold bathroom, coffee before water, phone before anything else, every morning for years, without variation.
We made changes before he went home. Simple ones. A glass of water on the nightstand.
A breathing exercise before sitting up. A slower, graduated rise from the bed. Sunlight before screens. Coffee pushed back by an hour. At his 3-month follow-up, his morning blood pressure readings had stabilized in a way they had not been in years. His cardiologist noted the improvement and asked what had changed. Raymond told him, and then he said something I have thought about many times since. I did everything they told me to do. I just didn't know about the 3 seconds. No one had ever asked him about the seconds between the alarm and standing up. Not once. Not in 10 years of careful, consistent medical care. That is why this video exists. Everything we have covered so far affects every adult over 60 to some degree. The morning cortisol surge, the thickened blood, stiffer arteries, these are biological realities of aging that apply broadly. But there is a group of people for whom this morning window is not just a risk factor. For them, it is the most dangerous 30 minutes of every single day. If you are over 65, your level of arterial stiffness is almost certainly higher than it was a decade ago, even if you feel well. The gap between what your vessels can absorb and what the morning pressure surge demands of them is wider than it has ever been. Your margin for error in those first few minutes is smaller than you may realize. If you have been diagnosed with high blood pressure, even high blood pressure that is currently being managed with medication, your baseline vessel tone is already elevated before the morning surge even begins. And here is something many patients are never told. If you take your blood pressure medication in the morning, it has not yet entered your system when the cortisol wave arrives. That surge hits you before your medication has had a chance to do anything. You may be well protected during the day and largely unprotected during your most vulnerable window. If you have type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance, your situation carries an additional layer of risk. Chronically elevated blood sugar directly damages the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your blood vessels that we discussed earlier. That lining is your first line of defense against arterial disease. When it is already weakened by years of blood sugar fluctuation, it is far less able to withstand the mechanical stress of a morning pressure spike. If you carry significant weight around your midsection, have a family history of heart attack or stroke before the age of 65, or have smoked at any point in the past, your plaque burden inside the coronary arteries is statistically higher than average. And plaque burden is where the real danger lives. This brings us to a concept that is central to understanding why so many cardiac events seem to come without warning. It is called vulnerable plaque. These are deposits of cholesterol and inflammatory material that have built up inside the walls of the coronary arteries over many years. They are often not large enough to significantly block blood flow, which means they frequently do not show up on standard stress tests. They produce no symptoms. They cause no pain. A person carrying vulnerable plaque can feel completely healthy, right up until the moment that plaque ruptures under the pressure of a morning cardiovascular surge, and a clot forms and an artery closes. This is the mechanism behind the majority of sudden cardiac events. And the word sudden is misleading, because nothing about the process is truly sudden. The plaque built up over years. The arterial stiffness developed over years. The morning habits that finally triggered the event had been running, unchallenged, for years. Most cardiac events are not random. They are the end of a process that was always predictable and almost always preventable. Now, let us talk about what to do instead, because everything we have covered, the biology, the morning surge, the compounding habits, the vulnerable plaque, all of it points toward a solution that is simpler than most people expect. I call it the 4-step morning shield. It takes less than 8 minutes from start to finish, requires no equipment, costs nothing, and begins protecting your cardiovascular system before the most dangerous window of your day has even peaked. Here is exactly how it works. The moment your alarm sounds, do not move. Stay exactly where you are, flat on your back, and take 5 slow, deliberate breaths before you do anything else. Breathe in through your nose for a count of 5. Hold for 2 counts. Then breathe out through your mouth for a count of 7. Do that 5 times. The reason this works is precise. A longer exhale than inhale directly activates the vagus nerve, which is the main pathway of your parasympathetic nervous system, the calming branch. This sends a signal to your heart to slow down and ease out of crisis mode, and it begins to blunt the peak of the cortisol surge before it reaches its highest point.
Research published in the journal Frontiers in Physiology found that this breathing pattern produces measurable reductions in morning blood pressure in adults over 60. 60 seconds of deliberate breathing. That is your first line of defense, and it begins before you have moved a single muscle. Next, rise slowly. Roll onto your side. Re-push yourself to sitting at the edge of the bed and stay there for a full 30 seconds.
Rotate your ankles in slow circles, 5 times in each direction. This activates the muscle pump in your calves, which pushes blood back up toward your heart and helps your blood pressure stabilize gradually before you stand. Then rise slowly, press through your legs, and stand still for 10 full seconds before you take your first step.
This eliminates the sudden pressure drop that forces your already stressed heart to overcompensate. Before you go anywhere else, drink 500 milliliters of water, 2 full glasses at room temperature. Not cold, which triggers vasoconstriction, and not hot. Room temperature water is absorbed fastest, begins restoring blood volume within minutes, and starts thinning the overnight thickened blood immediately. Here is the recommendation most people have never heard.
Add a small pinch of a natural mineral salt, Himalayan pink salt, or a quality sea salt, to that water.
Less than 1/8 of a teaspoon. During sleep, your kidneys continue filtering sodium out of your body. By morning, your sodium levels are slightly low, and without adequate sodium, plain water passes through your system quickly without being properly absorbed at the cellular level. The mineral salt helps your cells hold on to that water and supports stable blood pressure in the exact window when stability matters most. Finally, wait at least 60 to 90 minutes before your first cup of coffee. Let your cortisol peak naturally and begin to decline before adding caffeine to the equation. Your coffee will feel more effective, and your heart will face one less source of pressure during its most vulnerable hour. 8 minutes. 4 steps, starting tomorrow morning. Before we get to the close, there is something important I need to address directly. Because for some people watching this, the morning biological storm we have been discussing is not just a future risk, it is already producing signals. And those signals are being noticed and dismissed every single day.
The heart rarely fails without warning. The problem is that the warnings it sends are quiet, and most people have been conditioned to explain them away or simply push through them. I want to go through 5 of those signals now, because recognizing them may be the most important thing you do today. The first is unusual morning fatigue, not ordinary tiredness, not the kind that clears after a cup of coffee and a few minutes of movement. This is a deep, heavy exhaustion that is present the moment you open your eyes, worse in the morning than it was the night before, and that does not fully lift even after you have been up for an hour. A heart that has been under silent stress during the night does not feel rested in the morning, because it was not. If this describes more mornings than not for you, it deserves attention. The second is a mild tightness or feeling of pressure in the chest during the first hour of the day. Not sharp pain, not the dramatic clutching sensation you see in films. A dull heaviness, a sense of fullness or constriction that comes and goes and leaves you feeling fine afterward. Most people attribute this to indigestion or sleeping in an awkward position or nothing at all. In the context of everything covered in this video, that symptom in the morning hours is not something to file away and forget. The third is breathlessness during routine activity that would not have affected you 2 or 3 years ago. Climbing a single flight of stairs, walking from one room to another,
standing up from a chair. If these ordinary movements are now creating a shortness of breath that feels new or out of proportion, your heart may be working significantly harder than it should be to meet basic demands. The fourth is discomfort in the jaw, neck, or left shoulder that appears in the morning and has no obvious cause. These are referred pain patterns, areas where the heart sends distress signals along shared nerve pathways when it is not receiving enough blood. They feel like a stiff neck, a sore jaw from clenching during sleep, or a dull ache in the shoulder. In an adult over 60, in the morning hours, these sensations warrant a conversation with a doctor, not a note to self to stretch more. The fifth is a persistent, hard-to-name sense that something is not quite right. A vague feeling that the body is not functioning the way it should be, even though you cannot point to anything specific. This signal appears repeatedly in the histories of patients before a cardiac event. It is not anxiety. It is not imagination. It is your cardiovascular system communicating through the only channels available to it.
If two or more of these sound familiar, particularly if they appear together in the morning, do not wait and see. Contact your doctor, speak to a cardiologist, or seek an urgent evaluation. The cardiac event that is caught before it happens is the one that does not happen. Let us take a step back and look at everything we have covered today, because when you see it all together, something important becomes clear. The morning biological storm is real. The cortisol surge, the thickened blood, the stiffer arteries, the pressure spike, none of that is avoidable. Your body will go through that process every single morning for the rest of your life. But here is what matters. Almost every factor that turns that manageable surge into something dangerous comes down to behavior. What you do in those first 8 minutes, how fast you stand, whether you drink water or reach for coffee, whether you give your nervous system 60 seconds to settle before the day begins, these are choices. And because they are choices, they are things you can change, starting tomorrow morning. Your heart has been working for you every minute of every day since before you were born. It has never taken a morning off. It has never asked for recognition. It has adapted to every demand you have placed on it, quietly and faithfully, without a single complaint. The 4-step morning shield we covered today asks for less than 8 minutes of your attention in return. That is not a significant sacrifice. For an organ that has given you everything, it is the least it deserves. Tonight, before you go to sleep, do one thing. Just one. Fill a glass of water and place it on your nightstand, within easy reach. That is all. You do not need to memorize the full protocol tonight. You do not need to change your entire morning. Just put the water there. Because tomorrow morning, when your alarm sounds and your hand reaches out of habit, that glass will be the first thing it finds. And that one moment, that one small decision made tonight is where the change begins. And before you close this video, I want to ask you to think of one person in your life who needs to hear this. Not someone who ignores their health, someone who takes it seriously. Someone over 60 who walks regularly, takes their medication, goes to their checkups, and believes they are doing everything right. Someone who has never once been asked about the 3 seconds between their alarm and standing up. Send them this video. Share it directly. Because the information we covered today is not complicated, and it is not rare, but it is not reaching the people who need it most. You can change that for someone you care about today with one tap of a button. Everything I have shared in this video is based on published cardiovascular research and more than 2 decades of clinical experience. It is general medical information, not a substitute for your personal medical care. Before making any changes to your medications or your morning routine, please bring this information to your own doctor. That is not a legal disclaimer. That is genuine advice from a physician who wants you watching this channel healthy and well for many years to come. Take care of your heart
it has never stopped taking care of you.